It is time now for Money, Power, Politics. In the midst of a lot of deep economic concern because of the ongoing war in Iran, among other things, we got a better than expected jobs report today. We saw 178,000 new jobs in March. That was higher, far higher than the Wall Street estimate. And the unemployment rate ticked down to 4.3%. The nightcap is still here. Ron, let's start with you. What stood out to you about this report?
Well, a couple of things. There were weather-related issues with the prior month's declines in employment that were also, increased in size. So we had a bounce back from that. Nurses were on strike last month. They came back to work. 43% of the job gains last month were in healthcare, which continues to be the single driving force for employment. We had a small bounce in manufacturing. The unemployment rate went down because the labor force shrank by 400,000 individuals. And so it is not a uniformly good number. It's better than what we thought. If you look at the last 6 months, we're averaging about 68,000 jobs per month. And that's a very mediocre environment. And we are still stuck in this low hire, low fire world that doesn't do much for anybody. So it was a good number from a headline perspective. But when you do break it apart, it's not nearly as strong as it looks.
Yeah, the healthcare stuff in particular I thought was really interesting. Because if you look at jobs over the past year,
it's all healthcare.
It's all healthcare. Yeah. If you strip out healthcare, healthcare and social assistance, less than zero. We had negative job growth. Yeah. So I don't know. It's not great. Anthony, beyond the numbers that came in today, which are backward looking, of course, we obviously have some real pain at the pump and in other prices that Americans are paying. To what extent do you think that pain is going to seep into political outcomes in the next few months?
It feels like it has to. I mean, if you look back, the reason that, there are many reasons, but a very big reason that Trump is president right now is because of economic pain, because of inflation. Right. And you could tell people over and over again that under the Biden administration, the U.S. handled post-COVID inflation better than basically every other Western democracy. Didn't matter. People still felt the pain of higher prices. Again, Trump is in office now because of that, but he's showing no empathy to anyone for it. And a lot of some of his supporters have said things like, "Be patriotic, pay more for milk,"
or get a second job.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, for what? Trump's. How many executive orders did Trump issue about building more AI data centers? Right. Like this is going to be what boosts our economy and brings us into the future. And his own tariff war, just like his regular wars, are based on chaos and ego. And the, tariffs are now halting a lot of the constructions of data centers because not everything is built in America. Yeah. So
well, not just the tariffs. It's also that a lot of helium comes through the Strait of Hormuz, and it turns out helium is not just used in your children's birthday parties and in balloons. It's also used in the manufacturing of semiconductors, which are needed in data centers. So it's like there's so many different ways that he has just sabotaged his own economic agenda. And you see that in the polling, Molly, right? If you look at the polling, people are more negative on Donald Trump's handling of the economy than they ever were about Joe Biden's handling of the economy. First of all, he has the worst economic approval ratings across both of his terms, but they're even worse than they were under Biden.
Jimmy Carter, too, I think.
Yeah. Oh, really? I hadn't seen that.
It's really hard to believe.
Yeah. But it's because so much of this is self-inflicted.
Yeah.
He didn't come into a credit crisis like Obama. He really did come into a situation where he said, I'm going to do this thing, Liberation Day. It's going to be all these tariffs. It's going to onshore manufacturing. We're going to bring all these manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Okay, that didn't happen. So it's still going. He wasn't like, "Ooh, that didn't work. I'm going to take them down." He said no.
So manufacturing jobs, I think, are down.
Right, they're down.
So.
There's people
75,000.
Right, and there's not stability. So there's all sorts of contractions because people are nervous about job growth. About expanding their businesses. So it failed. But there's no realization. There's nothing with that. And then the other promise he made was that he was going to end foreign wars and make things cheaper. And so what has the foreign war done? It's made gasoline way more expensive.
So every day that this goes on, we get closer and closer to a protracted stagflation where the economy is slowing. And we've seen the Atlanta Fed now downgrade its estimates of first quarter growth to almost 1%. You've got the job market that is flat, and you've got inflation that's uncomfortably above target and likely going higher over the next several months. So that's an environment that is satisfying to absolutely no one. And
I mean, well, it should be satisfying to the Democrats.
From a political perspective.
Yes, for cynical political reasons.
Yeah. If they were in a position to take advantage of it and have a narrative and have a clear message and have a clear leader. But I think that there's a really important opportunity for the Democrats, and I would argue for independents especially. Trump was the grievance president. He's always been the grievance president. I will be the vessel for your anger, right? And I think the two most important questions for anyone in opposition to Trump to ask is, number one, do you feel safer? Do you feel safer right now? Because I don't think anybody in America does. And do you feel better off? And right now, there's this triad of diesel prices, gas, and fertilizer that are hitting everybody across the board. Throw in their health care when he says, you know, we don't have any money for daycare because of my war that I started. And J.D. Vance says, hey, if you need health care, ask grandma and grandpa to chip in, right? I mean, if you're out of touch with the grievance of the American people, you're in deep trouble. The question is, can the Democrats offer an alternative? Can independents or anyone else offer an alternative to be the vessel for the country's anger that is most focused on Trump right now?
But if you look at the generic, it's crazy. I mean, Democrats are up like 25 points. So people may be angry at Democrats, but Democrats are hugely benefiting from this.
To flip this from the Reagan years, the question is going to be, are you better off than you were 1 year ago today?
Right.
Yeah, I think the numbers on that are not so great.
Yeah.
Anthony, I want to bring it back to something you said earlier. You mentioned tariffs. Yesterday was the anniversary of Liberation Day. I'm sure we all feel very liberated, in addition to feeling safer and richer and all of the other things. I do wonder to what extent Democrats are able to take advantage of, again, this unforced error on Trump's part, because Democrats have been pretty pro-tariff, too, in the past. Maybe not pro these tariffs, but, you know, for a very long time, they were the more protectionist party. Do you have a view on how they should be messaging about all of this?
Well, it's a difficult dance that they've got to do, especially with the progressive wing of their party, who, like you said, is more protectionist. Has worked on the economic principle that economics is a zero-sum game. But what you could say is this was done by choice, right? So this was if tariffs were supposed to make us better off, if tariffs were supposed to improve the economy, surely there's evidence of that. Surely it wasn't just done chaotically and because the world is laughing at us, And as we saw, remember on Liberation Day a year ago when he brought out those charts that were fake,
Well, the charts are real, the numbers were made up.
Sure, yeah. So the content was fake. But if I'm Democratic leadership, I'm pointing to this and saying this isn't about whether tariffs themselves are right or not. Was this strategy based on anything at all other than Trump's, ego and his sensitivity?
Ron, before we go, I actually want to ask you about another choice that the president has made, the president and his party for that matter, which is that last year they gutted Medicaid. They gutted SNAP. They're now thinking about cutting lots of other safety net programs. If, in fact, we are going into a period of stagflation or, heaven forbid, a recession, how much would those safety net cuts potentially amplify the pain?
By orders of magnitude. So if you get past the midterms this year, when the Medicaid and SNAP cuts really kick in, and if we are talking about the so-called K-shaped economy, where if you're doing well, you're doing fine, but if you're in the middle or you're in lower income groups, you're either keeping up with inflation barely or you're getting absolutely savage. You throw that on top of it, and you have a whole cohort of individuals across the country who are going to be underwater, literally. I mean, they're already, with the ACA subsidies having gone away, Medicaid being cut, SNAP being cut, the president talking about reducing expenditures on other domestic initiatives. He is going to hit a large portion of the population that will be far worse off than they were. And again, it comes back to this question of, were you worse off under Biden or are you worse off under Trump? And there's going to be 2/3 of the economy, 2/3 of the individuals in this economy who are going to be significantly worse off. As it is, the top 10% of wage earners in the United States, you already know this, account for 50% of all consumer spending in the United States. So it's not that hard to see where we fall off a cliff and how.
Yeah, especially if these safety net programs disappear. There are new work requirements just at the time people are losing their jobs.